Hello, I'm from Vienna, from a really sunny Vienna afternoon today. Welcome to a new session of our Tech Recruiting Academy. And today we're really talking about making impossible possible. The title is Hard to Fill Vacancies from Stalemate to Success. I think it's really from this paralytic situation coming to a kind of a solution-oriented way. And I'm really pleased to have Jan Bernhard as our guest today. And even though his name sounds German, this guy is Dutch, so that's amazing. And we recently opened our Netherlands office, and of course we were deep diving into the market and very researching and evaluating the market. And what we really discovered, and that was really kind of a surprising fact for us, is that the Dutch HR ecosystem is extremely developed and innovative. There are many things I think they are really developed ahead of the rest of Europe, and therefore I'm really proud to have Jan with us. Jan, welcome, and thanks for taking your time and sharing your massive experience with us today in that session. But before we start, I really would ask the dear audience on LinkedIn to use the comment section to really raise your question, raise your comments. We can see that live in our software here, so we can see everything what you post immediately as well. So please raise your question, make it as interactive as possible. I think Jan will either try to answer the questions right during his presentation, or we will have probably 10 minutes at the end to go through the questions and probably answer everything what you have in mind and your thoughts and ideas as well. So please be interactive, please use this section. And now, Jan, I think the stage is yours.
Thank you, Rudy, for the introduction. And indeed, let's make sure that we get a nice interactive session out of this. So let me start with briefly introducing myself, so the people here have some clue who I am. We're going to talk about hard to fill vacancies, doing some problem solving. So my name is Jan Bernhard, which sounds very German. I think the name is German, but I'm Dutch. I'm living in Amsterdam. I've been living here my whole life. I've studied sociology because I was interested in people. So I studied sociology, which is quite a nice subject. And then I got into recruitment, and I got into recruitment in 2008, so 16 years ago. And just for the younger people here to give you some perspective, 2008 was the year where the cool young people in Europe started using Facebook. So I was, well, not cool at that moment, but I was young and I wanted to be cool. So I also became very active on Facebook because that was the place to be. So hopefully that gives some perspective about how long ago 16 years was. Of those 16 years in recruitment, I've worked mostly as an in-house recruiter. I typically was like the in-house headhunter or the in-house agency for difficult vacancies. You see some logos here of companies that I've worked at. It's not the whole list, but it's some. And for the past years, I've stopped working for one company dedicated as an in-house recruiter, and I started my own executive search firm called IT Leaders. And so my focus has been on, let's say, the leadership roles in tech and product, basically doing the same that I was doing before in-house, but now for multiple clients. And I like to do market research because, well, I studied sociology. I like to do research about people, so I still do that as a hobby. Um, so that's also a service that I have been providing in the past years. To give you some ideas, so the most recent projects I've been working on is a VP product, IT director, and CTO, typically for companies in Europe, because my network is in Europe. And market research is mostly just because I like to do it. Look at the bright colors and figures and stuff. It's just nice to do. But we're not here to talk about market research. We're here to talk about filling difficult vacancies, the ones that give you a headache, the ones that keep you up at night, the ones that you really feel I'm stuck. What can I do? Hopefully, I can talk about some ideas that might help you now or in the future if you see yourself in such a position. The reason that I picked this topic is, well, I like to do it, but also I think it's a very good skill to have. If you can be the go-to person for difficult vacancies, if you can be the problem solver, yeah, you can add a lot of value. And I think in this year and the past year, we've seen that for recruiters, it's become a lot more difficult. The days that every recruiter had 10 job offers are gone. We have to work a lot harder now to show our value to companies, to get a new job or to keep our jobs. And I do think that being able to say, that problematic department or vacancy or whatever, hand that to me, I'll fix it. I think that positions you very well for your own job security and for maturity in the company. I once had a freelance project at an American IT company where we were the EMEA recruitment department. All my colleagues had their own vertical or region to focus on. And my job was sort of the problem solver. So I didn't have one focus area, but they would just fly me in, sometimes literally, to any region that was having difficulties. Then I got in, I tried to solve the problem, and then I moved on to the next one, which was quite a nice position to have. And I hope I can share some of the knowledge that I did, that I gained over the years in this webinar. Before we really dive into the specific cases and examples, I want to have some general words of warning or advice. First of all, a common pitfall when you get stuck or when you feel that a vacancy is indeed becoming problematic. A very common pitfall, at least for me, is always that I will just work harder. You should work hard. I'm not trying to say you shouldn't, but just working harder and just doing more of what you have already been doing is not going to solve your problem, at least not on the long run. One of my favorite books is Animal Farm by George Orwell. There's a horse in that story called Boxer, and his solution to every problem that comes, his solution always is, I will work harder. Not going to spoil the book for those who haven't read it yet, but it doesn't end well for Boxer. So don't be that person. You have to work harder and smarter. You also have to look at the right domain. We'll get into more practical examples. But I think a lot of us have a certain bias. So I like sourcing headhunting part. So whenever I get a problematic vacancy, my initial bias is, okay, I'll source. I will do more sourcing. And typically they come to me with the saying, all we need is better candidates. But if the actual problem of the vacancy is not in the attraction part, you no sourcing will solve your problem. So sometimes the actual problem is in the selection. And sometimes it's the other way around. So I also know some recruiters who are more internally focused and they love to do the alignment of hiring teams or do good sessions or interview trainings, etc. And that's all fantastic work. But if for a specific vacancy the problem is not in the interviewing process, it's in the attraction part on the aspect of what are we looking for, how do we get them interested. If the core of the problem is there, then no interview training is going to solve it. So you have to be mindful of where lies the actual problem. Then, before we really dive in, last but not least, the mindset is really important. If you have that difficult, hard to fill vacancy, you're working on it, um, please don't think, I'm going to fix this on my own. You really have to come in with a mindset that you and the hiring team, you're all in this together. It's not just the recruiter's problem, it's everybody's problem, and everybody should work and be involved in solving the issue. Because if you, as a recruiter, are the only one that is responsible for the problem, then you're going to have a hard time. I, by the way, see a comment in the comment session if I can share the presentation. Yes, this will also be recorded, so you can rewatch everything later on. So, what I'm going to do is I've identified 5 common problems that I see happen more often. And these problems are often the root of why a vacancy is problematic or hard to fill. So I'm going to go handle them one by one. Of course, in real life, there is overlap between these, and sometimes there's multiple things going on at once. But I think it helps, at least for my own peace of mind, to sort of have 5 categories that I think are could be common problems. And most issues with hard to fill vacancies are one or multiple elements of these. So we'll talk about them one by one. The first common problem is that the hiring team is looking for a unicorn. Now, this is probably a term that everybody here has been familiar with. We've all heard it. We all probably have some idea what I'm talking about. I just want to make sure we're all on the same page. What I mean with a unicorn is, well, a fantasy creature that doesn't really exist. So the core of this problem is not that we're looking for something that is much in demand, like an AI prompt engineer now is much in demand. That's not what I mean with a unicorn. I really mean we're looking for something that doesn't exist. So how do you know that the problematic vacancy that you're trying to fill is actually the problem is that they're looking for a unicorn? Well, there's multiple signs or tells that you can pick up on to know that this is going on. This usually starts with you get the idea that the whole recruitment team or the hiring team is looking for someone to solve all their problems. So let's say you're looking for, I don't know, a head of data engineering. The data engineering team has multiple, let's call them challenges, on the tech stack, on the collaboration with the business side. Perhaps people are not happy. There's multiple things going on. And instead of addressing and trying to fix those problems, they open up a vacancy and they hope they can just hire someone that will solve all their problems in one go. That's a first sign that you're going to have a very difficult time in filling the vacancies. The second sign that the problem is that they're looking for a unicorn is that unicorns don't really exist. So they have created this mental picture of the ideal candidate, but there is no reality behind it. So what typically happens is that you get a job description, you see all the requirements, you do a search, and you go to LinkedIn, and you do a search with all the freaking requirements, and then you hit enter. And what happens? There's no results, does not exist. Or perhaps there's no results in your region, or Sometimes you've got some results, they're all false positives, but you get the idea. These people are just not around because that combination of skills, experience just doesn't exist. What also sometimes happens, and actually I like it when this happens, is that all the search results are colleagues, are the actual team that is in your company now or just left. Those are the only ones that pop up in your search. Um, that typically is a sign that that combination of things you're looking for only exists in that company because only that company uses that combination of whatever. Um, that can be frustrating if you do that search and you get no results or only colleagues. But actually, if that happens, you're quite close to a solution because you can show this to the hiring team and see, no, this is what happens. If you're looking for X, Y, Z, yada, 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 there's no one out there. And don't just be a negative person that says it doesn't exist. Um, you have to sort of help them understand what is possible. So if you first start with this search and then show them, well, if we remove that one requirement of candidate must have a PhD, then this happens. And then you have, I don't know, 150, 200 results. Or if we remove that criteria, or if we, you can play a bit with your search and show them in real time what happens with your potential talent pool. So even though this unicorn issue sounds difficult, the result is actually quite easy if you can get them to listen to you and if you show them reality. So the solution for me in this situation is always show them results, show them reality. And you can also get into showing the hiring team the current team that you're hiring for. So sometimes a job says that the person must have a master's degree in whatever it is, and then you show them the current team, and half of them does not have a master's degree there. So then you can really go back to the hiring manager and say, well, are these people not good enough? Are you not satisfied with them? Because if you are, then perhaps that master's degree is not that important. And you'll be surprised how often they come up with requirements that half of the team doesn't fit. If this doesn't convince them, if they're not overly happy with the current team, you can also show them the teams of competitors or of a company that they admire, and show them what are their skills, what kind of experience do they have, where did they hire from. The point is that you have to show them real people and show them also that in the current team, yes, they have that experience with this, and the industry experience, but actually half of them didn't have that before they joined the team. So if those people could pick up those skills when they're here, then perhaps your next hire can do so as well. Um, of course, there's a lot of ways to have that conversation, but I hope you get the idea, show them real people, get them out of that fantasy idea of a unicorn that will solve all their problems. Moving on to the next common problem for hard to fill vacancies is when the hiring team is looking for overqualified people. This is something that everybody has experienced, probably. Um, it also makes sense, right? It makes sense that the leaders of a company overestimate how attractive the company is. Hopefully, they are overly optimistic about the company and its future. Um, I wouldn't want to work for a company where the leaders are not very confident and positive and optimistic about the team. Um, but sometimes this does lead to issues in recruitment. So one of the and typically you get a gut feeling for this quite quickly. But the most important tell, the difference between this issue and the previous issue is that the people that are looking for exist for sure. You can find them, but they do not want to join your company. Um, and this can put recruiters into a difficult situation. I once had a hiring manager, was a director of IT, and he was telling me that in his view that the top engineers of Meta, Google, Spotify, etc., they should be lining up to join our company. If only they knew how fantastic our organization was, how cool the technical challenges were, etc. If only they knew that, they should be lining up for our organization. Um, Back then, I was quite junior, so instead of pushing back, I was saying, "Of course, you are right, and I will make it my duty, and I will make it my mission to get the word out to those people." Um, the problem here was, of course, that once I accepted this truth that these people should be lining up, um, as long as those engineers were not lining up, I was the issue. I had failed in showing the world how awesome we were. Um, so sooner or later, it wasn't working out, obviously, and it was interpreted that the issue was actually me. Perhaps I was not targeting the right people or sending the right message, or they didn't believe me. So you have to be really careful. This is what I meant with the mindset of we're all in this together. Um, if you accept a certain truth and then you make it your own sole mission to solve it, you might become the problem. Instead of just saying yes and run with it, what I should have done, a potential solution is involve the hiring team with your sourcing efforts. Show them your response rate. Hopefully, you can compare that response rate as well with other projects that you've worked on, and just show them, and involve them with, I'm going to reach out to these and these people. This more or less is my message. Do you agree? Do you think it's good? Okay, do it, and then show them the results. Show them also and share the feedback that you get from the market. When those people do get back to you, probably saying no, you can share that, hopefully get a reason. Sometimes you can get compensation data of that target audience, either by them or from the network or from the recruitment community. And you can go back to the hiring team and say, okay, so you think we can hire senior engineers of Spotify? Well, this is what they're making. So if we want to hire them, this is what we should offer them. Are you willing to offer that? If the answer is no, then perhaps we have to change our tactics. My favorite solution for this case is rather than just showing them what I've been doing, involving the team. Involving the team in contacting those candidates that should be lining up to our team. So making a project, showing them profiles, and tell them, can you reach out to them? Because you as an IT director, of course, they'll listen to you. And this, well, first of all, you've just delegated some of your work to the hiring team. That's sweet. But the real beauty in this is that they get to feel what we have felt for years, is that not everybody is interested. I once had a team lead who came to me and said, Jan, I can't believe it. I have identified 5 people. I've sent all 5 of them a message and none of them were interested. Only 2 got back. And he actually thought LinkedIn was broken. And I had to tell them, well, this is typically a bit how it goes. But if you let them at least do that once, then they see the results themselves and feel how difficult it is. And then you're halfway to, having that conversation of perhaps we should, well, not lower our bar, but change our expectations a bit. But the point is that you have to show them reality. And so again, their fantasy of these people should be lining up. Well, you have to show them the reality of what's actually happening. And if you just tell them, they're not going to listen. But if you can show them and hopefully let them feel it, they will understand. And you can start working on solutions. For instance, instead of trying to hire peak Messi, perhaps it's a good idea to spot potentials and train them yourself. That is a potential solution. So then you have those types of conversations. So common problem number 3 for problematic vacancies. Process blockers. And this is something that happens often. It's a bit harder to spot. It usually takes me a bit more time, especially if it's mixed with some others. But what I mean with process blockers is the actual problem is not necessarily in the attraction phase, it's on the selection side. So how do you know this is going on? Well, actually, you're getting good candidates. So, you do get pretty okay applicants, or when you reach out to people, you get a good response rate. You get some people interested. You feel confident about filling the position, and then they drop off. They either are rejected or they themselves withdraw themselves from the process. Um, yeah, if it happens once to me that I think this person will get hired and they don't get hired, okay, could be me. But it happens twice or three times, then perhaps something is going wrong in the selection phase. Um, Another obvious tell is, of course, if the hiring teams are unaligned. If you hear in feedback sessions or through the grapevines that they don't really agree on decisions that the other teams are making, that's a really good tell that, hey, this is something you have to fix. Because if the process is broken, if there's a process blocker, um, no amount of fantastic headhunting or marketing campaigns, etc., is going to get you solid results. You might get lucky ones, but that's not a strategy. So you really have to zoom into the drop-off rates in your vacancies. And sometimes it's that one task that rejects everybody. Sometimes it's that one person. In those cases, it's quite obvious. But a lot of times it's more subtle. So I've had a situation where we were looking for a technical person that also needed to communicate well with other teams. And then there was one group that thought we really needed a very technical person that can also do some communication. So they were really focusing on that part, and they preferred an introvert and rejected everybody that wasn't. And then in the next round, the other interview team really wanted an extroverted person that was not too concerned with the technical details. So they rejected the other half, and then in the end, we always came to zero. It's important to spot that. So possible solutions, if you think this is going on, is of course shadow interviews. See if you can be there. I usually tell them, for my learnings, I want to be in your interview so I can prep future candidates better. Um, Ask the candidates for feedback, especially the ones that you thought would get hired. They get rejected or they withdraw. I like to just call them and say, for my learnings, what do you think of the interviews or the assessment, or why are you no longer interested? Um, that usually gives a lot of insights on where the process is broken. What I also like to do is ask the interviewers' opinion on the process. So not necessarily on their part, but ask them if we should do something different in the other interviews or in the order or whatever. Um, some of them will come up with some ideas or some solutions. And if you hear different stories, or actually if you hear the same story multiple times, that's a good moment to get everybody in a room or a video call and say, hey, I've been spotting some different opinions on our process. Can we just brainstorm so we are all aligned again? So, common problem number 4. This is probably the one that I need to introduce most. I think the previous 3 immediately rings a bell to everybody that sees it. Common problem number 4 is, well, this is obviously Dobby from Harry Potter. If you are not watching Harry Potter, get a grip. But I'll explain. So, a house elf or a Dobby is a very capable wizard in the world of Harry Potter, but that's how this works in this fantasy world. They are destined to serve the house that they are addressed to. So they have to address a house of wizards. And that combination of very capable, but they need to serve someone else, so they get to do all the shitty work that the other wizards are not interested in doing themselves. That's where the problem is. That you're hiring someone very skilled and let them do pretty shitty work. Um, The difficulty with this is, of course, nobody is going to tell you that. It's typically very subtle, and it takes some time, at least for me, to spot that this is going on. Because of course, the hiring team will tell you that this is a fantastic role and we need someone brilliant, and they will list all the responsibilities and then a big list of requirements. So they will tell you it's a very challenging role. Um, and then you work on it, and then you start seeing very good candidates withdraw from the procedure. So you tell them it's a fantastic role, they're interested, they get into interviews, they hear a bit more about the actual position, and then multiple people start to say, well, thanks, but no. That's the first good tell that something is broken here. The other tell is that there are plenty of qualified colleagues internally to do that job, but they don't want to. Um, I was once working at a trading company where we had this position of an application engineer, um, where really the CTO came to me like, it's essential. This is such a high impact position for the future of a company. It's essential that we hire 2 or 3 fantastic application engineers. So I felt a lot of pressure and I worked very hard on it. We didn't get far. I didn't understand yet why. And at some point, when I was speaking to various colleagues about that role, I picked up that, well, actually, the skill set that we're looking for, we've got multiple colleagues that can do this or have done this in the past, but they're now working on projects that, well, at least to me, didn't seem as impactful. And then I noticed, okay, wait a second. If they say this is crucial to our company, we have people who can do it, but they're not doing it, that tells you, okay, there's something about this role that they don't want to do it. So if you feel this is going on, or actually in general, this is a good question, I like to ask the hiring team or the hiring manager, well, what happens if we don't fill this role? So you come to me and you say this is a highly impact role. What happens for hypothetical reasons we don't find someone in the next 9 months? What is going wrong? What are we missing as a company? Is something going to break? Are we missing out? Now, what happens if we do not fill this role? And sometimes the answer is, well, that means that person X needs to do the job for another 9 months. He doesn't want to. Okay, that's a sign. That's a sign. Um, so what sometimes happens is that there's a team, there's work in that team that a part of it, let's say 15% of the work there is just a bit not that interesting work. People don't want to touch it. And at some point, they open up a role for someone that takes off that 15% of everyone, so they can do the things they're more interested in. And that in itself is fine. It's not a problem. The problem is when they think, well, we're all brilliant technical people, for instance. So the person we hire to do the work we don't want to do also needs to be as brilliant as we are, because that makes communication easy. And that's when you get into this situation. So you really need to scrutinize the requirements versus the responsibility. So if you really zoom into what is this person going to do and what goes wrong if they don't do a good job, do we really need someone that is as experienced as we think we do? I also like the question, now, is there a growth path for this person? We had multiple people doing this job in the past years. They all moved to something else. Is this something we can propose to our future hire, that they will start here and then move on to something else later on? Um, and that thinking actually can turn this problematic situation around and sometimes create something very nice. And so I've had one case where we were in a tech company. We had let's say an internal IT help desk, where it was pretty hard to find people for, because the work itself was, well, important, but perhaps not as difficult. But we were looking for people that were extremely clever and ambitious, because you would work with very clever and ambitious people. So, to level, we wanted that. And we were struggling with this for a while. And then one hiring manager, I wish it was my idea, but it wasn't, a hiring manager said, well, instead of trying to find someone brilliant to do this work that is very experienced, why don't we make this an opportunity? So why don't we say we still want someone very clever and ambitious, but perhaps this was IT role, someone that didn't study IT or doesn't have experience in IT yet. So we make this a trainee. We make a trainee program where this person can learn on the job. They can do the what we think are a bit dull and easy tasks. They can do that to get into IT and to learn about systems. We give them training on the side, and then after 2 years, they can grow into a regular system engineer position. And this worked very well because, first of all, now the help desk was manned by very clever people. And we had a new trajectory for bringing in new talent to the company. So in these situations, even though they sound problematic, sometimes something very good for the company comes out of it. But you have to keep your mind open about yeah, what is going on and what benefits the company or the department. So the very last problem, common problem that I see sometimes, luckily not as often, but it sometimes happens. And the root of that problem is that they actually don't want to hire, which drives me crazy, but it happens. The tell that this is going on is that the hiring team is really delaying like simple basic decisions, simple things that they could just answer in 20 seconds and they're not giving you that answer. They're obviously giving no priority to the position, not making any time or availability. These are all signs that actually they don't really care about the outcome of this procedure. They really are not looking for someone ASAP. If that is the case, and you can just say, okay, we're not working on the position now, we'll open it up later, it's not an issue. And that's a good discussion you can have. But what sometimes happens is that a team has a headcount to hire someone. They have the right to hire someone, but they actually don't want it right now. So to save that headcount, they're not going to tell you close the role. They'll tell you to work on it. They tell you it's important, but actually they want to hire someone 6 or 9 months from now. So they'll just delay and stall everything. And yeah, you can do a lot of work and have a lot of frustrations working on this scenario where they actually don't want to hire. Um, it happens. It happens every now and then. It can be very frustrating. And for the solutions, to be honest, I don't know. This is the issue. If it happens, I really find it hard to solve. I've tried a few things, but I haven't found good solutions to this issue yet. It's also not my strong suit, these type of conversations. So hopefully people in the audience have some ideas, or if somebody knows, ping me and help me. Uh, I don't know. I know how to spot the problem. I still have issues with solving it. So perhaps this is a good segue to move to the Q&A sessions where perhaps people can help me solve this problem, or for any other questions that you might have, because then we have a good time for a good discussion.
Thanks, Jan. I mean, it was an amazing summary and I think amazing kind of angle on looking onto the issue. If I looked on these 5 problems that you mentioned now, and also your ways of thinking about it, probably I'm wrong with it, but for me it sounded a little bit that it is always a kind of an interface problem. Let's call it. Let's use this technical term between the HR people and the hiring managers, because these conflicts were all I get focused on this kind of interface. What is your tip on how to get that right? Because honestly, of course, I understand the issue. I mean, everybody tries to find the unicorns on the market, and everybody wants to find probably the Champions League players, if I take the football term now, instead of getting someone from the regional league. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's very difficult to understand and accept that your company is probably not the Zalando out on the market, or the Google or the Amazon, so you're probably a small brand, but you still want to get great talent. And what does it mean technically that HR and hiring manager can work in a way together that both get this kind of common understanding? Because I mean, you can either prove it by facts, you can give a kind of a sourcing list and tell them, okay, this is the response rates. But it starts, I think it starts way earlier. It starts probably in the definition of what are people looking for and why. And is the communication there already wrong, or is there some tips from your side how to get this kind of communication right from the beginning? Because otherwise it probably ends in one of your 5 problems.
Yeah, I think what happens often is that hiring is scary for any hiring manager. It's an important decision who
Yeah,
to hire is going to reflect their performance on the long term. So for safety, they will always say, I want someone extremely good because that's going to
yeah,
work out
yeah,
for them in the long run.
yeah.
Um, I think that discussion on, well, what is good, what is great, and addressing that talent or skill level is not one-dimensional, because I also like the football analogy. Well,
Mhm,
that's a specific game, but in the hiring market, we're not all playing the specific game. So what is a fantastic A player at Google might not even be that good for your company. So yeah, it gives a false sense of security that we want to hire from the top firms,
mhm,
um, because they might not perform as well. So I think having that discussion around what is good performance, what are outcomes, what do we need, already brings them to a more healthy expectation towards hiring, and their
mhm,
expectation towards hiring is uh, going to decide a lot
mhm,
in the future process.
mhm. There was one question in the comments, and you probably see it, so I do not need to read it. It was from Kushbo, where I spelled this name right. It was raised, I think it's the second last in the comments. How do we approach? Do you see it?
Yeah. So the question is, how do you approach the hiring manager as an agency when they demand unicorns? Bear in mind you are hired only for that position as an expert. Yeah, that is tricky. I have an executive search form. I get into this situation every now and then, where yeah, you get the project because they think, well, we need a unicorn, and this person will do it. And you don't, as an external, you don't have as much leverage as you have as an in-house person. What I what I like to do is just show them my view on it, and say what
Mm,
is possible, what isn't. If my conclusion is that it isn't possible, then I just don't do the project.
mm,
Um, that's the downside of an external is you don't have as much leverage. The upside is that you can just turn your back on it and say, I'm not going to do it, which is something you can't do as an internal.
mhm,
So yeah, really communicate what you think is realistic, and if they don't agree with that, and if they won't settle for that, then perhaps this is not the project for you.
Kushbo, does that answer your question? And is it sufficient answer for you? Probably you can just comment it quickly in the comments. And there was another one from an anonymous LinkedIn user: skip step management conversation. If this exists, that worked for me. So probably, Jan, you can give a comment on that as well if you understand it right. Otherwise, probably the user can probably clarify it with another sentence, because for me it's not 100% clear. I think I got the idea, but probably not 100%.
Yeah, I think that the remark is around, if a vacancy is stuck because they don't really want to hire, what do you do?
Mm,
And they say, well, skip the management conversations, and just don't work on it. Um, I think that's what they mean. That worked for this person. Yeah, sounds like a risky strategy,
mhm,
but that might work as well. Just pretend you're working on it if you know they're not hiring, and then move on with your life.
mhm. And for me, another thing which came in my mind during your presentation was, I mean, all the problems that you mentioned and all these situations, could they be avoided by having a kind of an earlier communication between HR, talent acquisition, and the hiring managers by defining the role from the very, very beginning? Or did it occur because it was not done from the very, very beginning, the other way
I
around?
mean, yeah, I get your question. So, of course, good communication and an early clear plan of what we're looking for is always important. If you mess that up, then you're going to run into trouble. The issue often is that you think you've done it, you think you have reached a good agreement on what we need, but their definition of great differs. So what they think, what their interpretation of a good CV is, or their interpretation of good technical skills, it's hard to really define that on every nitty-gritty detail in the beginning. So often it is more, you think you understand, and then in practice, their decisions are different from what you would have thought.
Okay. Last access to the audience. I mean, we have got a couple of minutes left, so if you have some questions in mind, if you have some thoughts in mind, just drop them now. For me, there's one thing which I want to ask you, Jan, is if I will be the elf for the Fae. I mean, I don't look like an elf for the Fae, so if I would be, and I would give you one wish, which you could wish from hiring managers out there, what would it be?
That's a good one. What I would love if hiring managers would go through the procedure that they have thought of for their own vacancies, which is difficult because your hiring team will recognize you. But there's this whole concept of mystery shoppers that you sometimes have. I think it's for the hire management applying for a job in your own company with a fake name. I think that can actually, they will learn a lot about it. Let's put it that way.
I love this idea of mystery shopping in HR. Really, that's a great idea. That's probably could be implemented in a funny way. Yeah, could help. Okay.
So anything else? If people have other questions that come up later, feel free to hit me up on LinkedIn. Always available there.
That would have been my next question. Thank you, Jan, for being with us and spending your time and sharing your expertise. And you mentioned it already, if people want to get in contact with you, so LinkedIn is probably the best way. And if you want to see Jan live on stage, we are having our own WeAreDevelopers World Congress in Berlin in July from 17th to the 19th. It's in Berlin. And it's 2 days. There's 15,000 developers expected to come. We will have 500 speakers on 20 stages for developer-related content, but we have also got the TRI, which we call Tech Recruiting Insights. It's a format which we docked onto the conference, and there will be Jan plus probably around 100 speakers within the 2 days talking about really HR-related stuff, talking about all this kind of from new work. We are covering, of course, artificial intelligence. We are covering all the topics that are really as buzzwords out in the market, and we really love to see you there. So it's from 17th to 19th of July. It's 2 days. It's amazing speakers. And I would ask my colleague Nico, because he could probably show us a kind of a QR code. If you scan that with your camera, with your iPhone, you get a kind of a 25% discount on the tickets. So that's kind of a special incentive for you guys watching us today. So if you need that, you probably can just comment later on, and we can forward that QR code to you as well later on again. I just thank you very much. Please stay tuned out there. Have a nice afternoon, a successful week. And it's once again, Jan, thanks for your time, and see you in Berlin, and goodbye. And
thanks for having me. See you in Berlin.
Yeah, thank you. Bye-bye.
All right.